Hello and welcome back to And That's a Fact, the channel where we take our subjective opinions and turn them into definitive, objective fact. I'm Neil Adamson.
And I'm Rick Papandrea.
And today we dive into our Elite 8 matchups for our ultimate Disney bracket. These are your votes determining who is moving on, and the winners of today are moving on to our final four. So it's exciting.
Yes, very exciting. Now, as always, Neil knows the winners and I do not. So I will be able to speculate, and then together we'll find out who wins.
Yeah, and we've been having a lot of fun doing this with you guys. As we say, we need you guys to make sure you're supporting us and voting for this to be worth it. And we've been having a lot of fun with it, and so just so you guys know, if you haven't checked it on the channel or you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do, because we are starting a new bracket that we just put out the video for, and that is a comic book movie bracket. So make sure you get involved with that one.
Yeah, voting for that is going to start either within the next 2 days, depending upon when this is uploaded.
Yeah. So make sure you're looking for that, and of course, easiest way to do that is to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you know when our videos are dropping. But
is right.
We move on into our Elite 8 matches and see who's moving on to the Final Four. Our first matchup is Peter Pan, the number 14 seed, versus Cinderella at the number 3 seed.
5 seed.
5 seed, sorry.
Neil, it's okay. Numbers are hard. This is our original Disney films chunk of the bracket from 37 to 77, right?
Yes,
37 to 77. These are the original Disney movies. This is a great matchup, and honestly, I have no idea. I don't have a guess here. If I'm choosing personally, I think I probably liked Peter Pan more as a young child. We've talked about this a lot, but it's the boys' movies versus the girls' movies. As a boy, I liked Peter Pan more, I think. But at this point, Peter Pan has been surprising me every step of the way. It surprised me when it beat out the number 2 seed Snow White. And so I'm not going to be surprised by Peter Pan anymore doing well. But I'm also not going to be surprised by Cinderella. I have a hard time choosing. What do you before you looked, did you have a guess?
Yeah, I mean, my guess was, that this would go to Cinderella. We talked about before last week, too, like, Peter Pan has been pushing along. It's been beating out some really tough competitors. Namely, like we said, it beat out 101 Dalmatians in the first round, which was the number 3 seed. But, the thought is that when you get to this level and you're facing Cinderella, the icon of Cinderella, Peter Pan is a number 14 seed for a reason. We discussed some of those reasons as to why in past shows. Some of it is, a tarnished reputation for things that are maybe weren't offensive and now are.
Right. It's important not to pretend that, these movies didn't have racist parts of them. We don't want to pretend that, we never were racist, but it's also important to say, listen, this is how we used to think, and now we think that that's wrong. And so I think it's important to be able to still say, all right, well, Peter Pan, we can enjoy that movie and we can talk about what about it is problematic. But I think something we haven't talked about Peter Pan yet is that, especially in the book the movie is based on, is that Peter Pan isn't really a hero. He's kind of this troublemaker imp character.
Surprisingly, the Disney version does capture that pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, he's not like evil, but he's certainly like a force of chaos, and he's kind of a jerk.
He's very mischievous.
He's not evil, but he's kind of a jerk.
Yeah, and we when we talked about Pinocchio and Pleasure Island, and that being something that for me as a kid, I really liked that sequence, as creepy as it was, just because. It was...
it's terrifying, but it's still it's entertaining and awesome and terrifying.
It speaks to your inner mischief, and I think Peter Pan.
Some of us have more of that than others.
But what Peter Pan had in that way, but in a much more in a much better way, a much kinder hearted way, was it's the core of the story, which was this idea of, being a kid and how exciting that is and how you don't want to grow up. And we talked about that being the driving force behind its run up into the Elite Eight. But the idea was that going up against something like Cinderella is going to be the one force that's going to knock that, going to be enough to hold that back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Cinderella should win, probably. I think if I have to choose one to win, it's Cinderella. But I think I've said this before, Peter Pan and Robin Hood, which it did not make the bracket, were both of these movies that sort of instilled me with that swashbuckler, devil-may-care attitude, which I so enjoyed in those movies. And it's still, to this day, a character archetype that I love. And so I like Peter Pan more. It was probably more important to me growing up and to like the person I've become. But I gotta give it to Cinderella. Like, if there's, in terms of which one should win, it's Cinderella.
Yeah, well, and we said going into this match was going to be what we figured was the nail in the coffin for Peter Pan. But we also said that maybe it turns Cinderella around and Peter Pan becomes the Cinderella story. And what ended up happening is just that. Peter Pan ends up taking it.
Really?
65%. Beats out Cinderella at the number 5 seed.
Oh
so
my
Peter
gosh.
Pan is the champion of the classic bracket. Peter
That
Pan is what you guys voted on to win this entire bracket of all the films spanning from 1937 to 1975 that Disney put out. You guys voted.
Incredible.
You think Peter Pan is the best.
So, in the final four, Peter Pan, man, over 3 of the most important princess movies, some of Disney's first, like, kind of weird movies like Dumbo and Fantasia.
Well,
that is
what's
incredible.
interesting is we've been talking about the Princess Bump, right?
Yeah.
All through this, we've been talking about the Princess Bump. What's really telling to me is that Peter Pan made it through without... It made it up to the Elite Eight without a Princess Bump. And so when it obviously had something really pushing it that these other films that had the Princess Bump didn't. So it's like, it's going up against the film that has the Princess Bump, but it made it there without that. So,
it must really resonate with people. And I mean,
hey, in our generation right now, no one wants to grow up. So I don't. It's not.
That's because growing up
surprising
means crippling debt and
they're killing Toys R Us. I mean, everything that is. We got to keep something alive that tells us it's okay to stay a child.
I think I still have my Tamagotchi somewhere. That's a lie. I wasn't allowed to have a Tamagotchi.
So Peter Pan moves on, and it will be facing the winner of our contemporary bracket, which this matchup came down to the number 2 seed Beauty and the Beast versus the number 4 seed The Lion King.
This to me is the hardest matchup of this, even harder than our Pixar one, which we'll get to. Both of these movies are so good. Both of them I would call, and I don't give A+s out to movies very often. Both of these I think I would give an A+ to. They're just absolutely iconic, absolutely like defined an era of filmmaking and influenced people our age, born in the late 80s and early 90s. I don't know if I have to pick one. If I have to choose, I think I choose Beauty and the Beast. I think that I have to give it to Beauty and the Beast, but I mean, Lion King, we've said this before, Lion King is based on Hamlet. Beauty and the Beast is a traditional fairy tale. They both have excellent source material. They're both funny. They both can be enjoyed by children and adults. They both have excellent songs. It's just really, really hard for me to pick one that should win and go on. And I don't know how, like, I don't even remember how I voted, honestly, because it varies. Like, in one moment, I'll be like, oh, yeah, this reason in Lion King. And then 30 seconds later, I'll be like, oh, but this reason, and never mind, it's Beauty and the Beast. And I'll just do that forever.
Yeah, these two, just like you were saying, there's so much about both of them. And we said in the past how Lion King, last week we had Lion King versus Hercules, and we said how both of those films basically, tried to do everything that Disney does successfully, and that one of them failed miserably, in my opinion, and the other one succeeded tremendously. And that one that succeeded, obviously, was The Lion King, and now it's going up against this other film, Beauty and the Beast, which is so powerful, and to me was such a huge part of my childhood and my adult life, and
Beauty and the Beast.
And it's a really hard matchup, and depending on your mood, you're in one camp or the other. I did believe that Beauty and the Beast would end up winning because of, for a number of factors, but being the number 2 seed, having the live action film that just came out recently, I think a lot of people have Beauty and the Beast on the mind, and that film to them is the one that, is slightly better than The Lion King.
And it is seated slightly higher too. We shouldn't forget that. Beauty and the Beast is seated as number 2. Lion King is seated as number 4. So, they're still pretty close. They're both very high. But if you do put a lot of stock in the seeds and in the sort of critic belief, then Beauty and the Beast is, higher seated. That's important, maybe.
But I do think that, the number 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, seating wise, those ones, Little Mermaid, Lion King, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, those films are all people's top Disney films from this period.
Yeah, for sure.
And depending on who you are and depending on what day of the week it is, you're choosing one or the other, and it's changing. So I wasn't going to be surprised whichever way this went. I did think Beauty and the Beast was going to take it, but Lion King ends up winning out.
Really?
61%. It was pretty close, but Lion King ends up taking it. So the Lion King wins the contemporary bracket. It is what you guys voted on as the best Disney film from 1975 to the year 2000, and it will be going up against Peter Pan for the
semifinals.
For the semifinal match. So
yeah,
so that's going to be super exciting.
Say, I can't disagree. Lion King is the best movie of that era. I can't disagree with that.
No.
I couldn't disagree with it if Beauty and the Beast won. They're both so good. And looking at Lion King versus Peter Pan, I think that'll be an easy win for Lion King. But Peter Pan has proven itself to be a juggernaut.
Yeah. I do think that the contemporary bracket was the stronger bracket. It always was.
Yeah.
And so I do think
agree.
Lion King has, a leg up. Especially as a what is it again? A 4 seed?
A 4 seed
versus a 14. So I do think Lion King has the leg up. We talked about Peter Pan being the Loyola Chicago of this bracket, and I think
and I knew what that meant.
It made it to the Final Four, just like Loyola, but I don't think it's going past that, just like Loyola. I think this is going to be the end of the line for Peter Pan.
I agree. He's going to have to grow up and get eaten by a lion.
You said you wouldn't disagree with anyone based on, if they had said Beauty and the Beast or Lion King being the best of this time. I agree. And I think the great thing about doing these brackets is that you get to a point where you can talk about these so much and you can understand why one film ends up in one spot and another film doesn't, even if it's not necessarily your choice. So that's the great thing about having you guys vote and figure this out with us, because we get to talk through it. We get to, try to understand why you guys picked what you guys picked if it was contrary to what we wanted.
Right. And if it was just us picking, we'd either be like, oh, this is the easy winner and move on, or we'd be evenly split, or we'd be like, neither of us can choose. So
but this way we get to talk about what you guys voted for. And maybe we're off base. Maybe what we're saying, why we're saying something moved on, maybe that's not why it moved on for you. So make sure you
Feel
guys
free to tell us in the comments.
Exactly.
If there's a reason you voted for something, if you love Peter Pan and you're like, you know what, I know there's some pretty inappropriate and terribly racist stuff in there, but I don't care. I love the movie anyway. Or maybe that's why you didn't vote for Peter Pan. Tell us about it. But we're going to look at Peter Pan versus The Lion King in our final four for the semifinals. And I think it's going to go Lion King. But either way, I'm not going to count Peter Pan out because I'm not putting money down on this one. I'm not putting money down on any of them. But you understand. It's a phrase. It's a saying.
So moving on to our next sub-bracket, we have the post-millennial bracket. And these are all the films that Disney Animation put out in the year 2000 or beyond, excluding Pixar films. So in this, we have our final two in this bracket were Zootopia as the number 1 seed, going up against the number 2 seed, Moana. So this bracket...
that's really interesting to me. This one, the seeding worked perfectly. Our final two were first and second seeded.
Yep.
However, I do think Moana is going to win, and I do think it deserves the win over Zootopia as the 1 seed. I loved Zootopia when it came out. Again, excuse me. Sorry, I'm going to say that again. I loved Zootopia when it came out, and I still love it. And I like the character of Nick Wilde a lot. I like that actor, and he has a little bit of that devil may care attitude that I like so much. But I think Moana is a stronger film. I think that Zootopia bites off a little bit more than it can chew in a lot of ways. And Moana does it. Moana tells a pretty straightforward story, and it's a lot of fun. And again, we've talked about the princess factor. It has the princess factor, but more importantly than that, it has the rock factor.
Dwayne Johnson. Yeah. We talked about everything going into this film that makes Moana so great. And the big one that we first mentioned was The Rock. And then the second one is having Lin-Manuel Miranda, writing the music. Then just from a social standpoint, you have a film that it's in so many films nowadays, it's like you're rarely going to please everybody when you put out anything.
It's impossible. Any art that you make, anything you make, there's no way it's going to please everyone.
But this is a film that is very sensitive to our culture and our society and does an amazing job, I think, from where I'm sitting looking at this film, that does an amazing job of being sensitive to, different issues and also in terms of just being appropriate from the standpoint of, this isn't cultural appropriation. This is, we are going to depict this culture that we're choosing to depict in this film as accurately as possible, and we're not going to try to sugarcoat things or whitewash anything. And everything about this film, the way that it was put together and the production about it, it has something behind it in that regard, besides just being a great film that has such amazing characters and such great actors and actresses and great songs.
If I can compare it for a second to Hercules, actually. I mean, I like mythology a lot. I'm a mythology guy, but we've talked about how Hercules doesn't work because the goal of Hercules was to make money. Now, obviously, these are movies. That's always the goal. But, Moana is diving into this sort of Maori and Pacific mythologies, but not in a cynical way, in a way that is
it's not exploiting.
Enjoyment, exciting about it's like let's share these stories together. Whereas Hercules does that much more cynically, I think.
Yeah.
And so I think Moana is. It wasn't my first choice on this list, but I definitely think it deserves to win over Zootopia.
And then in terms of taking, in addition to that, what we were saying, female representation and the Disney princess and remaking it for the new, for this century. And doing it in a way that, she's a strong, really strong character that, doesn't need that assistance. She needs assistance from certain characters in her life to learn certain lessons, but she's the one that's really
she
pushing
has the
through.
Agency.
Yes.
If you look at the classic Disney princesses in the original bracket, they have very little agency. The plot happens to them, as opposed to a character like Moana, who drives the plot with her choices.
Yeah.
And that agency, I think, is part of the reason it really has resonated with people and gotten such high esteem and acclaim.
Yeah, but it's just overall an incredibly enjoyable film in every way imaginable, and it does end up beating out Zootopia. This was the biggest gap, 72%.
I think this was also the most obvious.
Yeah, I agree.
On our list.
And I think looking at this list, I mean, some people going into the post-millennial bracket, it was like, oh, Frozen has a really good chance of taking that whole bracket. But to me, it was always Moana. Moana was the clear choice from the beginning, and it's not surprising at all that this is your champ for the post-millennial bracket. And Moana now will be going up against the winner of a much tougher bracket, and that's the Pixar bracket.
And if you do not remember, the final match of the Pixar bracket was WALL-E, our 9 seed, going up against the original Toy Story, our number 2 seed. And I know Neil loves WALL-E, and I think he wants WALL-E to win. And I have to choose Toy Story in this case, as much as I think WALL-E is a great movie, and I really, really do. I think that Toy Story deserves the win here. Toy Story, in addition to being the first of its kind and the first ever feature animated movie that's completely 3D animated inside of a computer, it is also, I think people forget, really funny, enjoyable by young children and adults. Don't forget, this is a movie where Joss Whedon was one of the script doctors on this movie and wrote jokes and stuff for this movie. And so there is a lot of that adult humor, like, through the movie, and if you haven't seen it in a while, maybe go back and revisit it, and you'll be like, oh, these are jokes I didn't get. Like, at one point, Mr. Potato Head takes his lips off and kisses his ass with them, and at one point, they call someone, there's a fishing line with legs, and they call her a hooker. Like, there are some adult jokes in that movie that just fly right over kids' heads, and I think that this gives Toy Story a huge edge in that there's layers of enjoyment based on your age, in addition to being a hugely important movie in terms of animation and like benchmarks in filmmaking.
Yeah, I really wanted WALL-E to win. I was expecting it to win because to me it is, I would say it's a better film, right? And we kind of touched on this before, but when looking at it, it's almost very similar to looking at Zootopia versus Moana, with WALL-E versus Toy Story. I think Zootopia and WALL-E are both more mature films. But
I buy that.
Toy Story and Moana are not immature. They just choose to follow a much simpler through line in those films.
I absolutely agree.
And in terms of how they tell the story, in terms of all these different things, right? I'm not saying that the theme or that the message or anything like that is different in terms of maturity level. But it makes sense to me that there's this much pull behind Toy Story because Toy Story is the enjoyable one. And just as Moana defeated Zootopia, Toy Story ends up taking this one 56%.
Wow.
Very, very close.
That's really close.
Very close. This was our closest one of these last 4 of our Elite 8. But like I said, I understand it. I'm not saying WALL-E isn't enjoyable, but it's much more of that kind of film that it's not the rewatchability factor because of the humor is a different kind of humor. The drama is a different kind of drama. Toy Story is much more fun from just it's
more
surface
accessible.
Level. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Toy Story is the winner of the Pixar bracket, the entire Pixar bracket. It is your champion, so it will be moving on to the Final Four, and it will be facing
Moana. This is our other semifinal, Moana versus Toy Story. Both of these movies, pretty recent. Toy Story is 96, Moana is last year, 2 years, very recently. And they're the rest of the Final Four. So we got Toy Story, Moana, Peter Pan, and Beauty and the Beast. Toy Story
Peter
versus
Pan
Moana. What do you think about that? What?
Peter Pan and Lion King.
What did I say? Did I say the other two?
You said Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, Peter Pan and Lion King. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have the answers here. I'm just trying to remember.
So yeah, so Toy Story, like we said, I think it's more equivalent to Moana. So I think that one's going to be an interesting matchup. But if Toy Story beat out all those other films in the Pixar bracket,
Yeah.
as much as I love Moana, as strong as I think it is, I don't think it's going to be able to take down Toy Story.
I agree.
If Toy Story took everything else.
I agree. I think Toy Story deserves the win here. What I'm just realizing is that we're looking at two 3D computer animated films in one semifinal and 2D cell animated drawn films in the other category. And Lion King, there's a little bit of like CGI environments in there, but it is a drawn a film. And so we have kind of the old school going up against the new school. But I think that Toy Story takes it over Moana. And I think that Lion King takes it over Peter Pan. So my guess is we're going to see Toy Story versus Lion King as our championship battle.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think it's going to be Toy Story versus Lion King, and that's going to be a really hard matchup. But my guess is that nostalgia is going to win out. Lion King's going to beat Toy Story. I think if it was different,
you say nostalgia, but these movies came out 3 years apart.
That's true. That's true.
In the 75, almost 100-year history that we've got going on here, the two movies that we think are going to be in the final came out a few years apart. They were worked on at the same time.
Yeah, that's true. It's really hard. It's hard to say which one's gonna take it.
It is.
I'm gonna say Lion King. I'm gonna say that I think Lion King's gonna make it.
I agree. I do think Lion King beats Toy Story, for a lot of reasons. But we can talk about those once that we know for sure that those are our final two. Looking at the final four, though.
This is our final four. We've got Peter Pan, Lion King, Moana, and Toy Story. And whatever it ends up being, whoever ends up moving on, that's going to be based on you guys. Whatever you decide to vote on, that is going to determine who's moving on. So you guys have to make sure that you get out and vote.
Right. The link is below us in the description. Now you only have to vote in two contests. Way easier than in the previous weeks. So please do that because we can't decide for ourselves. We need you to decide for us.
We have no ability to make choices.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are at the point right now where anything that really, short of Peter Pan winning it all, I think any of these films winning it all is going to be completely okay with us.
Yeah, and not surprising or for anyone. Even if Peter Pan won, there's the little boy in me that'd be like, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, I agree. I think we are at a point where any of these is going to be exciting.
Any of these four wouldn't surprise us. Money on the table, I think it's going to be Toy Story and Lion King, but nothing would surprise me.
Yeah, I agree. I think Lion King takes it all.
Just to switch it up, let's say it's Moana versus Peter Pan. Who do you think?
Moana, hands down, Moana, without a doubt.
I'm not gonna bet against Peter Pan at this point. I'm like,
yeah, that's true. So this is where we're at. We are down to the next video that we do. We will be discussing
the final championship.
Who is moving on to the final championship, and then after that, we'll have one short video that will discuss the winner of that match and just kind of give a recap of everything. Yeah. But really, the next two videos are going to be pretty short because this bracket is winding down, and this is pretty much the end of our Disney bracket.
Yeah.
So
we're coming into the end game.
Yeah. So, speaking of which, Did
you like that?
Some of you will get that, but we want you to get involved with our next bracket, which is the comic book bracket. We mentioned it at the beginning of this show, and that preview video should be up with
you can find it on our channel, and we'll try and put the link below us so you can just go right there if you want to find it. We're really excited about that bracket. This bracket has been and continues to be a lot of fun, And that one's going to be a lot of fun too. So we got
Yep.
a lot of cool stuff coming. But you guys have to vote. So follow the links, vote, subscribe, click the YouTube bell, leave comments. Tell us if you think we're wrong or whatever. Find us on Instagram and on Twitter because we're not sure how we're going to do voting yet for the next bracket in the comic book bracket. We want to find something that works a little better. So we'll be updating you guys via social media. And so just keep your eyes open. Be ready to engage.
Yep, absolutely. This one, just so you guys know, this one will still be in Facebook for the remainder
the rest of this
bracket.
bracket.
But
But these are the
where it's
4
at.
best Disney movies. You've said 4 best Disney movies that there are: Moana, Toy Story, Peter Pan, and The Lion King. And those are the best Disney movies. And that's a fact.